Good day, this is John Camilera, and welcome to I Don't Know What I'm Doing, a show about inspiration, creativity, and the creative process. Today's guest is Christine Murphy-Estes, speech-language pathologist who has spent her career in the research, diagnosis, and treatment of numerous voice injuries and disorders. Christine, let's start off with my opening salvo. If you could choose a theme song for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's hard. A theme song. I think, oh man, this is really hard. Learning to Fly by Tom Petty.
Ooh, now why that song?
Yeah, that song, of all the things, of all the different musical influences I've had in my life and things I've studied, Learning to Fly seems to always come back into my life when I need it because I think that I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly eager to learn. And just when I think that I've got things down, I realize how little I really know. I think, the thought of like learning to fly, something that's not achievable for humans to do, at least not at this time, I think that just kind of speaks volumes. I just want to keep learning, keep growing, even for striving for things that are seemingly insurmountable. That song, just as soon as I hear the opening guitar riff, something happens inside of me. And I even was listening to it today. I don't have wings. I ain't got wings, as Tom Petty says. So I'm just going to figure things out and kind of move along the best that I can.
So going with figuring things out, where did you first start realizing you were a creative person? Like we can go way
I
back to when you're a little kid or
Oh, I was always a creative spirit, always in my own imaginary world, always looking at what was around me and figuring out what to make of it. And I remember, I credit my mom for this quite a bit. I would go to her all the time and say, I'm bored. What can I do? And she'd say, go play, figure it out. And I thought it was so mean at the time, but it would make me go outside and look at what was there and figure out something creative to do, whether it was collecting leaves and sticks and deciding to make a witch's brew and playing with that, or or finding things to craft with inside the house, or just trying to think of anything. And I was always musically creative. I was always singing. I feel for my parents because they probably never had a moment of silence, and now I understand how important that is as a parent myself. And I have a daughter. My 7-year-old daughter is just like me, and constantly singing, constantly creating, and I look at that, and in moments where I'm like, oh, I wish I could just have one moment of quiet, I'm also like, oh, keep singing, keep doing this, don't stop doing this. I don't want to stifle this. So I think I've just always been a creative person. I've always seen what was around me and tried to figure out what I could make of it.
going to the part where you're talking about, you sang a lot as a child. Were you one of those kids who you're just constantly listening to music and kind of singing it back? Or were you one of the kids who sometimes like you just made up your own songs as you went along? Like your
Both.
day was just spent kind of humming along?
It was both. If I heard a song, I knew it quickly. I learned it quickly. I memorized it quickly. It just stuck in my head, even if I was making up my own words to it. And when I was growing up, for a really long period of time, all we had was the country music channel on TV. So I would be singing along to Juice Newton and to Crystal Gale. And so I'd be singing those songs, and Barbara Mandrell. And then I would also be singing like a narrative of what I was doing. I'd just be walking around and singing, like, I'm going to the refrigerator to get a snack, and just singing at all times, without any rhyme or reason. It was just kind of my thing. I still do it.
So as you're sitting here making up your songs for yourself and singing songs, Who were the people at that time who totally supported your creativity and kind of backed you up and kind of pushed that forward for you?
I think that my parents always enjoyed seeing that I was a creative spirit. They always liked hearing what I did musically. I was a really shy kid. I was very introverted. I was always kind of closed up in my room, in my head, thinking about things that seemed so deep to me at the time. And so when I kind of started being musical and being artistic, I think my mom really recognized that and fostered it. She didn't tell me not to do it. She would say, well, let's listen to this. Or if I wanted to work on some sort of fun art project, she would the next day have all of these supplies to make other art projects. And then when I went to school, when I was in elementary school, my teachers really picked up pretty early on that I was very musical, that I was very shy and quiet. But when it came to music, that was where I would open up and I would laugh and smile and have fun and express myself. So I think all of my teachers really at a young age encouraged me to do more musically. It never occurred to me at a young age like, oh, I want to be a musician or anything like that. It was just this is a thing that I do and I love doing it, and yay, people let me do this thing.
So now you take what you have here, you're getting to school and you're following kind of like your this path of singing and music. What on your journey becoming an SLP, what was the first step for you? Honestly, like you realized that music is what you wanted to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't think that I really had a lot of thoughts when I was applying for colleges that music was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life at all. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what to go to school for. I just knew that I was good at music, that I had a good ear, I had a good voice. People told me I was good at it. People were preparing me for college auditions. And suddenly it just seemed that I was auditioning for music programs. I can't remember making any decision that I want to be a professional musician, so I'm going to go to college for music. I just remember it was like just that's what you're doing. That's what you do. And so with that, like I loved my college experience. I loved it. I was so lucky to end up in the studio of Bob Lowen at Crane, who was just like another parent to me. And he introduced me to things because I came in with very little knowledge about classical music, actually. I didn't know who famous singers were. I didn't know a lot of operas. So he introduced me to all of it and would give me listening assignments. It was all so eye-opening and I fell in love with it. Really was like, wow, I think I want to go for this. So that kind of led me to go for my master's degree as well, which is why I ended up at McGill, working with Bill Neal and Dixie Ross Neal and being in the opera program there, which was also a really good experience. But once I left, I realized how unprepared I was for becoming a professional musician. I knew diction, I knew vocal technique, I knew lots of operas and lots about style and conventions when it came to opera, but I didn't know anything about how to market yourself as a singer. There was this naive thought like, well, I do this, so I'm going to audition and I'm going to land jobs and then I'll be a working singer. But it's not like that. It's just not. A lot of it has to do with luck and who you know. Certainly, you have to have the goods to back it up. But that's when I started having a lot of anxiety about performing. a lot of anxiety about auditioning, to the point where I would go through auditions and just have this kind of narrative running through my mind of everything I was doing wrong in that audition. And I wasn't committed to my character. I wasn't committed to what I was singing. I was just judging myself for everything I was doing wrong. It was really a horrible time. If I was given a second opportunity, if they gave me a note and said, try this again, but think of it this way, or if I had a callback, I would do very well because the nerves were out of my system. That first impression is a big deal. I took time away and started going for some biofeedback therapy for performance anxiety.
So as you're going through this point where you're hitting your anxiety and everything, how did you feel creatively? Because that whole process of going through an audition, this preparation, and you're getting into a character, you're trying to form how you're going to perform and move. What did that anxiety take away from you when you're going in for an audition?
It took so much away. It completely pulled me out of the creative process. It was like, now I'm not the character. Now I'm not in the setting I'm supposed to be in. Now I'm not, seeing the things that I'm supposed to be seeing in the room that I'm standing in. I couldn't get my head into everything that I worked so hard to put into my body. It was like my head was pulling me out of all of it. um, it it stifled my creativity. I couldn't be creative because I was too caught up in Christine singing an audition instead of Mimi singing to Rodolfo. I couldn't do it, and it was heartbreaking, and it wasn't me anymore, and I lost my creativity for a while. And in working on it, in dealing with my performance anxiety, a therapist who did biofeedback and had me on a heart monitor and had me on a pulse oximeter so that we could actually measure what was happening if I was placed into a simulated audition setting. I learned how to control it, but in that process, I realized I think I want to use my creativity in a different way. And I don't think that my creativity is best used on a stage. I think I'm supposed to do something different with it. And it was hard to come to terms with that because of all the time and money and commitment and passion that went into studying it. But I'm so much happier on this side of things.
What was that like as a shift over from going from, oh, I'm doing performance, I've spent years studying performance, and now I'm shifting over to a clinical side of things with it? How did your creativity shift with that?
Yeah. I mean, first I had to go back to school and get another master's degree. And I was really, at first I put it off. I put it off for a whole year. I mean, the thing with speech pathology, it kept popping into my life in various forms for years. I don't know if I believe in fate. I don't know. All I know is I ended up a temp in a communication disorders department when I was in grad school. I like, there were so many opportunities where it was like speech pathology, here's this thing. And so I took a sample class. I just took an introduction class, introduction to speech language pathology or communication disorders. And I realized I was home. I just, from the first class, it's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And when it came to creativity, it turned into, okay, I'm not interested in the things that a lot of the people here are studying. I think language disorders, cool, but that's not my thing. Expressive and receptive issues, aphasia after stroke, super interesting, but that wasn't my passion. I knew I wanted to go into disorders of voice. But so with the creativity, I really kind of ended up forging my own path into a career in voice disorders by cobbling together my experiences as a singer, the clinical foundation that I was learning in my speech pathology courses, all of the things that, Bob Lowen at Crane taught me about anatomy and physiology of the voice, and finding this super specialized career to go into. And now the way my creativity is in this career, I mean, it's very multifaceted. I work with creative people every day who I'm working with performers. I'd say a good 60% of my caseload at least is professional performers, most of them on Broadway, or students in musical theater, but also classical, pop, rock, all sorts of things. And, you know, I don't believe that there's any one size fits all approach to voice therapy at all. I think that you really have to tailor everything you do to the person in front of you and what their needs are. So it's never about trying to make someone have the voice I think they should have. It's helping them achieve the voice they want to have and the things they want to do, whether it be crazy, wild singing and growling and making all sorts of, you know, sounds that we would consider, quote, unhealthy, or beautiful classical singing. I just went off on major tangents there, but it just goes. That's my mind. That's my creative mind going.
When you're working with a patient, how does it feel being on the other side of the window with someone who's coming in and they're coming to and they're like, my creativity is limited because of either an injury or, you know, some sort of disorder that's going on? What's your process for working with a patient coming in with new, or they're frantic because they have a career and they love doing this career, but now all of a sudden it could be gone because of something going on with their voice?
Yeah, it can become super emotional, the whole process, especially when you meet somebody for the first time and they've just been told, you know, a name of something that is on their vocal folds. And so many of them come in and they're terrified to hear a word like nodules or nodes, or polyp or something like that. They're panicked. And now on the other side, I realize how much less of a disaster that type of thing really is than what I thought it was like when I was in music school. You know, when they come in, they've gotten this diagnosis. They know they've had a problem for some time. It could be a matter of days or it could be a matter of years and just a progressive issue, often that they've been afraid to come in and be evaluated for because they don't want to know what's there. But after a while, it's like, we have to do something about this. And that issue certainly stifles their ability to be creative. You know, in some instances, we have to pull them from the show or reduce their number of performances. And that's the rarity. More often than not, it's about finding workarounds in the show, or finding healthier options. And it's a process of both putting on band-aids and doing overall rehabilitation at the same time, which is a real test to my creativity, because I'll tell you, anytime I have a patient on my schedule, whether they're a new patient or an established patient, I have a plan in place, because speech language pathologists are planners. We plan, we make lists, we have like a whole hierarchy of what we're going to do. But more often than not, that plan just goes out the window because you ride the wave that's coming at you. And you have to be able to think on your feet at a moment's notice, to figure out, okay, what does my patient need today and how am I going to help them find it? And how am I going to help them find independence in that so that they can recreate it on their own and not become dependent on me for it?
So what are some challenges you've run into when treating a disorder? Someone comes in, they might have nodes or things like that, but have you ever run into a situation where you really have to kind of step back, go back to your whole thinking process to try to develop something new for somebody else?
Yeah. I have worked with, I'm going to think of some very specific instances. I worked with somebody who was in a show on Broadway, and there was really no healthy option to do what he had to do. He was required to perform with really suboptimal posture. He had to do a really extreme voice. His role was extremely physically active. And there was really no healthy option. So it had to be about, okay, we're going to set everything up around this role so that this role is the vocal part of this role is a piece of your costume, and you're going to plan your entire day around the fact that you have to do these extreme things, which means you can't do this, you can't do this. You're going to do these specific exercises. When you get off stage, you're going to do these things. You're going to shut it down for this amount of time. It took such meticulous planning. Other times, I've had interesting challenges where, I think it's amazing when you work in the world of performing arts. You see this beautiful embracing of diversity and uniqueness and all of these incredible things. So our performers are they're defying gender stereotypes. They're singing things that may not be written for the gender that they've been assigned to, but maybe we're working on changing things and looking at transgender options and how to healthfully get a transmasculine individual singing a role that his vocal folds were not necessarily built to sing. And it takes tons of creativity to figure out, okay, how are we going to navigate this and do this for you? Because this is who you are, and your vocal folds weren't always designed to do those things, so we're going to do them, and we're going to figure out how to do them. Or goodness, I mean, so many things in my office. I'm fortunate to have a decent sized office in Manhattan, but that still makes it a small office in Manhattan. And we have to often try to recreate the stage, or if I'm working with a fitness instructor, recreate the fitness studio, or if I'm working with a teacher, recreate the teaching environment in my tiny office. So, so I will have YouTube videos with background noise, or with talking of students, or chairs moving around and all sorts of things to try to recreate the setting and say, okay, we're going to work over this and figure out how to work through the things in your workplace that give you trouble.
Talking a little bit about the challenges for trans performers, getting their voices ready in transitional environment. What are some challenges that a trans performer faces? Because I really don't know much about the subject matter of the adjustments made to like the vocal folds, because I thought there was sometimes they shave the folds down, or they do some surgical changes to it. How does that affect their voice and their ability to perform?
When it comes to transmasculine performers or transmasculine individuals, hormone therapy can be a real benefit. It takes time, and it takes a lot of adjustment in working out, pitch changes, or changes in where the break is. So there's a lengthy period of adjustment in getting used to what the hormones are doing. When it comes to trans feminine individuals, I have not worked with someone who has had a surgical procedure yet. Some people certainly do have them, but I don't have experience with that. So what I'm working on with trans feminine individuals is working on helping them often achieve a pitch range and an aesthetic and kind of all of the other aspects of the voice, that go beyond just pitch. Things like degree of breathiness, of inflection, in all sorts of things that can kind of add to how they are perceived. And it's emotionally laden, it's challenging, it's incredibly gratifying to work with these individuals and to try to help them find the voice of who they are. um, and and there's also some grieving that happens. I mean, it's often very celebratory when we find, like, oh, like, you had a phone call and someone called you miss. That's amazing. That's awesome. Yes. But there's also a process of grieving what was. Um, and it's difficult. And, my role as a voice specialist, a voice therapist, um, I try to make space for anyone to talk about what's going on emotionally, you know, regardless of what they're dealing with, because I think the voice is part of your identity. It's part of who you are. And when something is in the way of that, when something threatens to take that away, it's a highly emotional issue. At the same time, I'm not a mental health professional. That's not my scope of practice. And as much as I want to give life advice, as much as I want to be that person, I'm doing a disservice if I go too far with it. So I always make space for it. I even sometimes, someone suggested to me setting a timer, and I thought that was brilliant. So it's like, okay, here are 4 minutes. Say everything you want to say. I'm going to listen and I'm going to acknowledge because it's important and I respect it. And then we have to do voice therapy because that's the only thing I'm good at. I'm not a trained mental health professional, so I can't help you with the other things. I'm not good at it. So, and I think another thing that you have to um, really consider that challenges your own creativity is understanding that what someone is going through when they're dealing with a voice problem is not the same as how you or me, how I would feel it as if I was going through a voice problem, or it doesn't relate back to what I've done. I can bring up examples of things that have happened in my life, and that's great, but my experience isn't their experience. And if I'm always filtering things through what I've done, I'm not acknowledging their own personal journey. So I think a big thing about creativity in this field is keeping your mind open and really listening to the message someone is giving you so that you can best understand what it is they're going through as individuals.
Now, when you've gone through just really heavy duty emotional days, even though you're not the one who's going through it, you're there with the person. You're holding their hand through some very serious times for them with, as you said, a very important thing, their voice, their identity. When you get done with that, how do you set that to one side when you come home from?
Like, how do I not bring it home with me?
Yeah, that's one thing that I've worked through in education, where there's a lot of stuff that you think that you've left it in your classroom, but then you come home and you don't realize it, but it's there, it's affecting you. So as I've gotten older, I realize where kind of like I have a point where I let things go. When you're on your way home or when you get home, what are some things you do to kind of clear your mind of these things?
That is such a great question, because I'm not always very successful at that. I think a lot of us who go into therapeutic fields or educational fields, we're helpers. That's what we do. We're helpers. We want to help people. We're very empathic. We feel their feelings. We take on their feelings. We feel their successes and we feel their failures. And it's hard. I'm not always very successful at leaving it at the office. and not bringing it home or not taking it on myself. And, I'll have days where some days it's like all great energy and everything's going wonderfully. And it's like, yay, this was the happiest day. And I have some days where it feels like everyone is struggling, or it feels like, what did I miss? What didn't I do? What could I have done to help that person feel a sense of success and achievement? And so one thing that's helpful for me is I have a long commute. So, so, for better or for worse, I have a long commute, and that commute gives me time to breathe and listen to music or read something or write something, anything before I get home. So that I try to use as time to focus my energy on something else. And I mean, it's hard because I'll often go to voice research and it's like, no, that's not what you should be reading on your way home. You need to remove that from your head and read something else. So I might read just, nonsense, just, or something that makes me laugh, something just funny. And, when I get home, I find I am happiest and able to detach some of that emotion if I do something that just really engages my mind. And it could be doing yoga. I love doing yoga, and really committing to it and focusing on the breath work. That's a good way to kind of clear my head and reset and focus on everything else in my life, like my kids, or making a really complicated dinner and being very mindful about every step of it, like make a really precise chop on the vegetables and, every aspect of it, just taking time to be mindful of it, every, every aroma, every taste, taking time and not rushing. Because when you work in New York City, all you do is rush. You're just rushing through life. So there isn't that time to decompress and take all of that away and start with a clean slate. So I try to do it once I'm back at home with varying levels of success.
So you spend your all day being creative in a way where you're aiding and helping people. When you get home, and this is kind of a question, since you started off as a singer, do you make time for yourself to sing at home, or to kind of like just throw yourself recklessly into some music that to work on to, either help you decompress or just kind of take that creativity in a different direction than what you're doing at work?
I'm trying to now. I'm trying to um, I'm trying to find silver linings to this terrible pandemic and finally work on music that I'm passionate about. And so now I'm working on a song cycle that I've wanted to sing since I was 19. And I asked my voice teacher when I was 19 if I could sing it. And he said, not until you've lived at least half of it. And I have lived almost all of it now. So I'm actually working on it, and it's incredibly exciting. I have no plan to perform it. I'm not planning on renting a recital hall. I'm not planning on, airing this online. Who knows? I don't know what's coming out of it, but I'm actively working on it. I'm translating it. I'm breaking it down. I'm rehearsing it. I'm working with an accompanist tomorrow night over Zoom just to do it because I think my soul needs it and my soul has missed it. I have really missed music. Otherwise, pre-COVID, when my kids and I are at home, we get into full dance party mode. And it's all like Descendants music. That's what my daughter's really into. We listen to a lot of the Descendants. Yep. We we listen to a lot of the Queen of Mean, and and we play it and we sing it together and we dance to it. And I mean, I've got music playing here all the time, and there's always a spontaneous family dance party about to happen at any moment. That's where I just really love to let go. I want to show the kids I want to show them how to have fun, how to let go, how to be their creative selves. We do silly art projects like recreating paintings, or going out in, and looking for leaves and twigs and making faces for face the foliage, or anything. I try to get them to do wildly fun, silly, creative things at all times as best as I can,
So that
while
sounds
they
like it's
learn
fun.
their math.
See, it sounds like that's very much, it's not just fun for them. You get a little bit of enjoyment out of doing some ridiculous things when
Sometimes
you
I get
have the
more
free time to.
enjoyment than they do. Sometimes I'm like, I think this is for me, but I'm going to do it anyway because they'll appreciate it one day. I want them to look back at their childhood as, they had a silly mom who was dancing around all the time and playing music, but we had lots and lots of fun. I want them to remember that. That's what I want for their lives.
That's a very awesome sentiment as that goes. I have just a couple more questions for you before I let you
Yeah.
go. But the first, there's I'm actually going to ask two advice questions. So the first one is, what is, as an SLP, what's some advice you'd give to, especially I have students who sing some really loud hardcore and thrash kind of metal music. What is some advice you would offer to those students who are singing in definitely vocal growls and yowls and things like that to not damage their vocal cords?
Such a good question. That's such a good question. And like, I love working with rockers. I love working with people on tour. I have a video up on Twitter that so many people have loved. It's of Alex Brightman doing his Beetlejuice voice, because I worked with him to kind of help him find a healthy way to make his Beetlejuice voice. Because the reality is, there are extreme ways of singing. We don't want to sing metal like an opera singer. There are the growls, there are all those things. So there are lots of things to consider. I think it's very important to work with someone and have a technique to do it, even though it seems like it's just noise or something, or there are real techniques to help you do it in a healthy way, where you can keep your vocal cords healthy and do lots of things you want to do. And so I think the first thing, like, if you want to learn how to sing, or if you're just naturally gifted at singing and you're putting in extreme things, screams, growls, all of those cool affects, work with somebody. Reach out to a voice teacher so that they can help you do it in a healthy way. That's thing one. Thing two, have a warm-up regimen to help you get into that voice, and then have a cool down regimen to help you take off that voice so that you aren't carrying potential tension with you in your speaking voice, or in all the other things that you do. Three, pay attention to your speaking voice as well. Like, we think about singing as this, precious gift, and we spend time working on it. We spend money training it. But the fact is, the voice you're using, a good 98% of your time, is your speaking voice. So pay attention. Are you fatiguing yourself? Are you pushing? Are you being too loud all the time? Is something off? There are people out there, there are speech language pathologists, there are good people who can help you speak in a way that supports all the things you want to do as you sing. And then 4, pay attention to just your general physical health. Drink the water, eat in a healthy way, get your exercise, do all the things to take care of your body, because your body is your instrument. And it's not a saxophone that you get to put back in the case. You're wearing your instrument all day long. So if you want to do extreme things with your voice, treat your body well.
All right. And now my last question for you is self-serving for me as someone who uses his voice all the time. What is some advice or, techniques I can do to make sure that I can say this for almost all teachers? Every single teacher always runs into about late November, December, we lose our voice. And it's always one of those things. This was actually, this past year was the first year I haven't lost my voice in probably 5 or 6 years. So what are some things as speakers what are exercises or little things we can do to make sure our speaking voice is always our best voice?
That's such a good question. And I'll preface this by saying a few weeks ago, I gave a free webinar to school teachers and I recorded it, and it's accessible on my site. It's completely free. There are no catches, nothing like that. It's it's a little over an hour of education, exercises, vocal hygiene, just recommendations for the classroom, recommendations for online teaching. So I have a whole bunch of resources there, and I only did it because I care and because I was feeling helpless with the pandemic. And I said, everyone's reaching out to performers and no one's reaching out to school teachers, and they're all moving to online platforms. And I really respect that. So I have that out there, but also things to think about as teachers. So, a lot of teachers are at the highest risk for voice injury. Okay, you have actually the highest incidence of voice injury of all professions, including performers. You beat the performers. And the fact is, you're not just reading information, you're motivating your students, you're getting their attention, you're doing all sorts of extra responsibilities. Your day doesn't just end with your last class. You're constantly talking. And a few things to think about are, one, are you talking at your students? Are you being louder than you need to be? Sometimes speaking at a softer volume, which can often be much healthier for the voice, it draws your students in and it makes them listen to you more closely. 2, check out your classroom setup and make sure it's really conducive to using your voice. A lot of teachers, when I meet with them, they realize that they don't really like teaching to long rows because they feel they have to call out to the last student in the row. So they look at maybe setting up small groups or teaching in a semicircle or doing something where they can walk around, like things like that. 3, finding nonverbal ways of getting the kids' attention instead of calling out over all of their conversation and noise. And this can get super creative. I've had people use whistles. I've had people use gongs. I've had people flicker the lights or clap their hands. I had someone use a rain stick. I was like, well, that's interesting. Something that lessens the burden on your voice. What else? I would say when I work with school teachers, we work on finding a warm-up regimen for them to do in the morning. And it will often start off with exercises like lip trills, we call them, where you're kind of blowing air between your lips and making sound. It's a thing that babies do all the time. There's actually a lot of science behind those seemingly simple exercises. The science that I didn't know when I was a singer, but I learned about it once I went back to school for speech pathology. I teach teachers how to feel a sense of resonance or vibration in the front of their faces when they're speaking, instead of putting the focus on their throat. So I want to teach you something right now. Okay. What I'd like you to do, okay, you're going to breathe in slowly and quietly through your nose and think of it like you're taking in the aroma of something really good. Okay. And you're just going to chant for me on a nonsense word. We're just going to say mom, 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 and you do it at whatever pitch is comfortable for your voice.
Mo, 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 mo.
Yeah. And what I'd like you to feel for, I'd like you to see if you can feel maybe a little vibration on your lips, your cheeks, your nose, somewhere towards the front of your face. See what you feel.
Mo, 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 mo.
Good. Can you
Kind of feeling it.
you feel it kind of on the in the front of your face, the
Yeah,
sides?
right about here.
Okay. Okay. Take it up a fourth. Mom.
Oh boy. Mo, 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 mo. I'm kind of actually feeling it like along here now.
Okay, so you're feeling it along your jawline. Okay. You're going to speak on mom. We're going to speak some gibberish for a little bit. We're just going to go mom, 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 mom. And we're going to see how much you can feel in the front part of your face as you do it, in your lips, your mouth, your cheeks, your nose. Try it.
Mo, 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 mo,
Move.
mo,
There
mo,
you
mo,
go.
mo,
Move
mo.
your inflection around. Think of something you'd actually say.
Mo, 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 mo.
Good. Now I want you to do the same thing, but do it in your throat.
Okay. Mo, 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 mo.
Do you
That
feel a
one,
little
that
bit
was
of a
like,
difference?
yeah, I definitely feel it because you can feel it shift down to like just around here on my throat versus up here in my face.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you notice that sometimes as you're speaking, it's actually going down here a little bit more in your throat?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I do.
can you
Yeah.
you just did this beautiful thing. You just went mm-hmm. Can you go mm-hmm and then keep talking from that place?
That's kind of interesting. It's almost it reminds me a little bit about where I'll be speaking to students about playing certain pitches and they're trying to reach for it and I'm like, just raise your eyebrows. Like you're off by a smidge, raise your eyebrows and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just try it. Like you'll have a shift in your sound that way. Oh, okay. That's really fascinating.
This is a teeny adjustment. We call this resonant voice therapy. It's a teeny tiny adjustment, but that teeny tiny adjustment has a ton of payoff. And what it does is this is a really healthy way to project your voice without fatiguing yourself. And when I think about my whole story of being a singer and becoming a speech pathologist, okay, so here's creativity in action right here, okay? I was trained to sing without a microphone. And in as part of that training, I had to learn how to use resonance to help my voice carry, even if I was singing over a big orchestra. And part of that is really feeling that sensation here in the front of my face and not pushing from my throat. If I pushed from my throat, I was dead meat. I was not going to be able, I wouldn't be heard, and I would be putting too much pressure on my vocal cords and would be more likely to get hurt. So we actually teach people to speak this way, and it can help them speak over noise. It can help them project over their classes. It's a very healthy, sustainable way of speaking. So that's just one technique. There are lots of things teachers can learn to do, but that's just one, and you just did it beautifully. You just had a 2-minute voice therapy session and you adjusted your voice beautifully.
Well, thank you so much for the fantastic advice. What we'll do is we'll link your webinar into the show notes, below the video, so that way people can actually take some advice from you and get to watch it and learn some things from you. So, Christine, I want to say thank you very much for being a guest on the show, and it's been fantastic talking with you and catching up with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing. and it was a pleasure to be on your show.
That's it for myself and my guest, Miss Christine Murphy-Estes. I'm John Camilleri, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I hope you adapt, improvise, and overcome your challenges to find your creativity. See you soon.